Hello, this is Nathaniel with HeartFab. A few days ago, I got a Facebook message from a customer who wants to put in some ADA handrail. Very simple. All it is one top railing and no bottom railing with the loops on the ends. And then he also asked me to do a metal door frame to go along with that. So I'll be doing both of those projects, and the customer is going to be doing the install on the door. I'll be installing the railing, but the customer also, to save some money, is going to be doing painting on the railing. Should be pretty simple, so let's jump into it. In the office here, you can see I got some basic sketches of what the customer wants, and a note on this: anytime you're putting railing on concrete, you always want to measure out where each foot is going to go, and maybe put a string line between it and then measure the height on each foot. What I did is used a string line between these down low to the ground and then measured my distance, and then whatever the difference is, I add or subtract that to the foot. Because in the past, I've made all these feet the same, and what ends up happening is when you go to put it on the concrete, some of these feet might be either too long or too short. And then you got to cinch it down with the bolts, and then those bolts are under tension, which is just not ideal. So I'm going to get onto my computer, and then I'm going to make an actual drawing of this with angles, and then we'll go from there. I'm starting off here by making my first foot there, and then I bring out the protractor and I'm making my angle. And in my case, this is a 4-degree angle. Yours might be different depending on the job. And then I'm coming down here and making the rest of these posts, making sure that the spacing between each one is even, and that the lengths, as I mentioned before, are the correct lengths. And here I'm drawing in my extension grab handles so that this will meet the ADA codes. That extension should extend no less than 12 inches past the last post and 12 inches down. Now I'm using a free version of SketchUp, and for beginners or intermediate, I would highly recommend this. It does phenomenal work with basic drawings like I'm doing here, and it also does great with 3D. The good thing is, it is a free program, but one of the downsides to it is when it comes to making 2D drawings that you can actually send off to a CNC company or laser cutting, it does not do so well, especially when it comes to doing anything that has smooth radius edges. And lastly, I'm drawing this little door frame. You can see it's very simple. I'm making this frame out of 2x2 1/8-inch thick tubing. Very common material, easy to work with, and then one support bar in the middle. This will also have a regular door handle, so I will have to make a special extra little bit of tubing for that. You can see that here. But overall, very simple. Okay, so I got the drawings done. Now I'm going to head out to the shop and get a start on it. I am waiting for some of the materials to show up. The delivery truck should be here at some point today. I never know when it's going to show up, so wait for that. But I can get some of the parts cut, and then when the rest gets here, we'll continue on. The way I like to cope my pipe, or to notch it, is I set my bandsaw to about 30 degrees to make about a 30-degree cut. And as you can see, I just make 2 cuts. Make 1 cut and then flip the tube over and make another cut, and it makes a pretty decent cope. It's not perfect, but it does work, and if you want to make it a little bit more perfect, you can grind down those sharp edges. Ultimately, the best way I've ever found is a friend of mine has a metal mill, and what he does is just put a hole saw that is exactly the size of the pipe and then uses that to cut straight through the pipe, and it makes almost a perfect saddle. And when you're doing this, you have to account for the metal bending or moving, because it always does. If you think you're going to weld something with one dimension and then it stay that dimension, you're probably wrong. So one thing you can do to counteract this is you can strong back your metal, where you put a piece of angle iron or a piece of tubing, something that's stronger than the material you're working with, and you either clamp it or tack it between the 2 pieces. Or you could just tack your piece directly to the table. That would work too. One thing I found to be helpful with this project, when you're welding square corners like this, tack weld them a little bit off of square and then put the weld on the side where it needs to bend in. And then by the time you get your weld done, it'll be perfectly square. Then I began the very long process of grinding these down. When I'm grinding them, I'll generally start with a harsher grit flap disc and then go on to a more fine disc. Just don't ever use a grinding wheel for this. Make sure it's a flap disc, because if you use a grinding disc, you probably already know this, but it's gonna make that metal really harsh and you're gonna see those lines straight through the powder coat, if it's getting powder coated. But in this case, it's gonna be bare and the customer will take care of that. After I've used the flap discs on it, a lot of times I like to hit this with an orbital sander, and that just kind of takes out the rest of the imperfections. I had to wait a few days before my steel supplier was able to deliver this material, but when I did, I started cutting it. Now, I decided, since one of these railings is 25 feet and one is 27 feet, I'm not going to try to do it in one piece and weld two tubes together. Instead, I'm just going to put a splice like this in the middle of it. That should make it pretty easy to transport, considering I only have an 18-foot trailer. Then I started tacking these legs on, making sure to set my angle finder at 4 degrees. After doing the other end, I went to work welding these legs on, making sure to get as even spacing as I could between each leg. Now on this one, the spacing ended up not being perfect because when I put my splice in, that would have been right at the center of a leg, and obviously that wasn't going to work. And a little trick that I found to do this is you measure the inside distance from one end to the other, and from there you can figure out how many posts you need to put in the middle to match code. And what you do is you take that total measurement and you subtract the thickness of the posts from that. Just for an example, if your posts are 1 inch wide and you have 3 of them, then you subtract 3 inches from the total measurement, and then you take that final measurement and divide it by the number of spaces you have. For example, if there's 2 posts in the middle, you know there's going to be 3 spaces, because there's always one more space than there are posts. I don't mean to confuse you, but I hope this makes sense. One thing I want to make mention of here, and this is something I've been learning lately, and maybe this is obvious, but when you're welding something like this, if you put all the weld on one side and not the other, it's going to move to that one side. So what I've been doing is doing a little bit of weld on one side and then do a little bit of weld on the other side. Instead of just welding at one place continually, I've been alternating back and forth, and especially on these loops on the end, that helps keep these straight. Because if you don't do that, you'll see a definite bend when this is all done. And the last couple of things to do on these railings was weld these foot plates on, and finally sand these rails down and get them ready to go. I simply started tacking this door together, making sure to square each corner as I did so, then measuring out each side to make sure that the dimensions are right, and then checking my diagonals, making sure that they're the same when I put the tape measure from corner to corner. That ensures that it's square. And then I got my string line out and ran 2 diagonals across the top of this, and what this does is make sure that this is all flat and on the same plane, because you don't want a door that's twisted. Then I put my centerpiece in. Then you can see I'm cutting out the middle of the tube right there to put this tubing for the door handle. This is going to be a standard door handle, so it'll be 2 1/8 inch hole and 2 3/8 back set for the latch. Then I tried to get my plasma cutter running, but it was having some issues, and eventually I found out it had to do with the cord that this was running on, because it's running on a 110 adapter, and eventually I messed around with the plug and got it to start cutting and got my hole cut out. There you can see I put my 1 inch hole for the actual latch to go through. When I was welding this door up, you can see diagonally here I put a thick tube and tacked it to the frame, and this helps strong back this so that when the heat is applied, this door doesn't warp. And then I also tacked it down to the table. And the last thing on this door was to weld those hinges on. Everything's all ready to go. Let's head out to the job site and get it installed. I had gotten this railing lined up, I had to try to make it as straight as possible. So you can see I'm looking down the length of the railing and adjusting each leg to make sure it is as straight as possible. Of course, it's not going to be perfect, but do the best you can. And there it is. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Leave your comments down below. I would love to have some feedback from you guys. And if you enjoy this kind of content, consider subscribing to my channel, because Lord willing, I will be bringing you a lot more content just like this.